off of this, and then when Richard comes in, I'll stop. He can take over, and then I'll pick up the rest of the PowerPoints afterwards. All right, and hopefully then that'll leave you time to do your power ups that we've been talking about. Okay. So, why is this not working? There it is. Data migration, right? Some of this stuff you'll know already, so we can go through it fairly quickly, right? But it's taking all your data from your local system to the cloud. And for most companies, this has already happened, so it's not as big an issue as it used to be because they're used to the process using online storage and all. On a personal level, people are now quite familiar with their data and photographs and stuff from their phone being stored in the cloud. Okay, so it's not as big a thing as it used to be, right? But the problem is then when it comes to moving your applications to the cloud and your data to the cloud, your database to the cloud, I should say. Okay, that's where the tricky sort of difficult things happen, right? Data integrity is a big key term here in terms of moving your data from one place to another. You have to be able to prove the authenticity of that move, that your data wasn't compromised. Even if the data remains the same when it comes from the local to the cloud, if there was opportunity for the data to be compromised, it breaks your data integrity, okay? So that's all very important. Later on, you'll see slides about ISO numbers and stuff like that. There's organizations out there that come in and rate the cloud provider so that you can depend on them, right? Because we haven't got the skills as a bakery or a pizza place or a furniture shop to go in and rate the cloud provider that we're dealing with because they don't even live in the same country, maybe, right? So we depend on people who have the skills to give them ratings and star ratings and ISO standards and stuff like that. Much like when you go out for a meal tonight, you look in the front door of the restaurant and it's got a 5 on it, hopefully. It's got a 2, don't go in, right? Somebody with, that level of expertise has went in and checked all the, the hygiene and the cooking and all the facilities in that restaurant to make sure it's got a certain standard, and they've given you the standard on the front door, so you then don't have to go and measure it. You can use its services knowing that it has already been up to standard. Does that make sense? So that's what standard organizations are about, right? So you try to find a cloud provider that has the star ratings, right? A process takes a while. How long is it going to take? Some data transfer can take quite a while, especially if you've got low upload speeds. Some providers actually, if you've got a lot of data, provide a very old-fashioned but very trusted way. They send a secure core van and lots of hard drives, and you take your data in the secure core van to the data center and it's plugged in. Sounds very old-fashioned, but it's actually probably the fastest way to transfer a huge amount of data, actually. Okay. There will be a bit of downtime as you move your services to the cloud. Some companies do it as a phased over, sometimes maybe over the weekend when the company's not being used. There's different models out there for that, okay? And there will be technical issues, compatibility issues. All of that has to be thought about, right, before you actually start the migration process. IBM, Google, Azure all have migration applications that help you with this process now. At the start they didn't, but now they do. Right, data movers to the host. All the data on the host is moved to the servers on the cloud. Okay, and you have to replicate everything: data, database, applications, files. Okay, the operating systems, everything. Now, that's maybe slightly different now because you can use containers instead of having to move the operating systems. So you can modernize your system as you move to the cloud. It's a good idea to, do the 2-in-1, okay? A array-based software is used to migrate data. You've got all sorts of different software. Think about Sync on your Windows, which synchronizes between your OneDrive and your Windows desktop. That software automatically synchronizes the data and moves it and stuff like that, okay? And then migrating your virtual networks and your file storage and folders. In the early days of cloud, you couldn't load folders up. You had to just do file by file by file. But not modern cloud, you can actually, move blocks of files and move folders and all. You can drop folders on top and stuff like that. So it has improved lately. Okay, let's go to it's cold outside, but nice and warm in here. Okay. Right. Best practices. Where you're moving your data from, where you're moving it to. Okay. How it's going to be moved, what processes are in place, what security is in place. Okay. extract the data, transform the data if necessary into the format that you have to be in before your cloud provider recognizes. Again, not as big a problem as it used to be, because most modern cloud providers actually allow multiple applications to run on their cloud services. Wasn't always like that. And then duplicating the data when you get there and beforehand, backup and stuff like that. Policies in place, procedures in place, all around data migration, test your data, validate it afterwards to make sure it's still accurate, and a whole log system and audit system of all the process. Okay, data migration is a major part of your journey to the cloud, and it has to be well documented. Okay, otherwise you could not maybe prove the authenticity of your data and its journey, and therefore lose data integrity. Okay, storage is pretty straightforward. Something everybody's probably familiar with nowadays, because you have cloud storage has been around for a long time. So you know the ins and outs of it yourself, and maybe your local storage is out of date compared to your cloud storage, and keeping the two things synchronized, uses software to synchronize them and stuff like that. Okay. The database migration is a bit trickier. However, if you follow the old 3-tiered system that we talked about back in database module, right, then your database can be moved more freely, because your schema and your client side are all separate from each other. Okay, so literally from the schema to the database, it's the actual database itself. It's just a hyperlink. Move your database and just change the link. That's in theory how simple it should be if you use a 3-tier process. If it's a monolithic system, then that's going to be more difficult. You'd have to start splitting up the 3 tiers before you start to move it. Okay, there'll be things about the database size, its bandwidth requirements, all that sort of stuff as well. You'd have to consider. Okay, and they talk about testing the process first at a local level. I suppose it's not proper. The only proper way of testing it would be to move all, do a duplicate copy of all, and then test it before you actually switch off the local copy. But there's various ways of doing that. Compatibility is an issue, but not as bad as it used to be. Haven't read that word for word. You can read that later if you want, or maybe you've read it while I was talking. Okay. Hopefully it makes sense. These are your applications. So as you know, most applications now are cloud-based. But in moving from the local to the cloud, there's quite a few sort of issues, maybe you would say, in terms of what services can run where. We've become quite good at running most of our Office applications now in the cloud. Okay, but you have limitations. Things like right-clicking on the tool menu, for example, isn't really possible in the browser version of the software, because if you right-click, you're actually interacting with the browser's menu rather than the software that's inside the browser window. Does that make sense? So you have limited functionality. It's a different environment, and the application then has to be designed around that environment, so it can't use the full functionality of a desktop version. Okay, and there has to be different ways around that. And your software, in most cases a browser, has to facilitate a different way of interacting with the software, but still be user-friendly. Okay, does that make sense? If you want to see what I'm talking about, go to Word locally and go to Word online and just feel the difference between them, the menus and stuff like that. Okay, and that's the reason for that. But right, software as a service, least cost, platform as a service, less cost than infrastructure as a service. So although we're moving away from very distinctive SAS, PS, and IS, basically the same thing applies. If you want to use a full network system, oh, there's Richard. I've been waffling away here, and I didn't really realize the time. And they're all the way home. They're only online. So I suppose if you log in here, then that's the best. And then I'll like you log into the Teams, right, guys? I'm going to let Richard. No, well, basically got this PowerPoint finished, I think. They can read that for themselves. Look. All right, guys. So I'm going to stop sharing screen, log out, log in on my laptop. Let Richard log in here and give you this Power Apps demo. All right.
No worries.
Do you want to stop the recording and restart it again when Richard starts? So we've got it sort of as a separate recording. Be good for the guys on Tuesdays as well. All right.